Connection Red Alert report for Wednesday, May 19th. Today we have a very special guest, Lela Gilbert, co-author of the Family Research Council's recently released paper, The Resurgence of History's Oldest Hatred. You can find a copy to download and read in full on our website. Lela is a senior fellow with the Family Research Council as well as a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Lela has authored many articles and books and lived in Israel for over 10 years, returning to the United States in 2017. You can find Lela on most social media platforms. Simply search her name, Lela Gilbert. We're so excited and privileged to have her joining us this week to share her insights. And now, here's Lela.
Thank you, Lela, for joining us. I'm so excited to have you on. Unfortunately, we have difficult times right now, not only with anti-Semitism as a global atmosphere, but the particular events happening in Israel right now. But I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your experience examining and writing about persecution in general and the manifestations of those persecutions in being against Jews, and how that relates then to the Christian community.
Well, I wrote a book called Saturday People, Sunday People that was based on a jihadi saying that's on a flag. That's a picture is in the book. It says, on Saturday, we kill the Jews. On Sunday, we kill the Christians. And this is an expression of radical Islam that really represents a philosophy that these are two groups of people that are at odds with the, quote, true religion. And so when I write about Christians, I'm also well aware that this anti-Semitism has been going on for centuries. Christianity even came after. One of the first examples was the book of Esther, when they wanted to kill all the Jews where she was. So, it's nothing new, but I think we have to kind of look at it together. And I think we have to also join together in our pushback against both forms of persecution.
Okay, and when you look at the current status of anti-Semitism in the world today, particularly your paper addressed multiple incidents, 100 incidents in America, when there was well over 900 in that time period you examined. What can you draw about the manifestation of that anti-Semitism in connection to Christians being in line for the next level of persecution? And if you can think about that against the strains of anti-Semitism you wrote about in your paper, you had 4 strains: the Islamic-based, the far right-based strain, the far left-based strains, and the Black separatist strains of anti-Semitism. So, in context of today, if you were going to look at one of those strains and how they're manifesting, what's something you'd like to focus on today?
I think we have to look at what we're not seeing in the news, which is the reference to the radical Muslim attacks, which we don't hear much about. And often the race of the attackers is eclipsed in the news reports. For example, in the New York Times or the Washington Post, eventually a photo may show up. But some of these groups are very active, and certainly the Islamist ones are. But a focus now in the US is on white supremacy, which is an element, but probably not the largest by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
So that's one of the things I think people have to look beyond the news. They have to follow organizations like Jerusalem Connection, also like ZOA, Zionist Organization of America, Camera, groups that tell the truth. And you have to take the time to find out what's really going on, because all of these groups are active, but we're only hearing mostly about white supremacists.
Right. I mentioned in my report last week, after I read your paper for the first time and I saw those 4 categorizations, I was sort of looked at those 4 in a row, and I thought, gosh, some of these almost seem to work together, right? In America, at least, we see the Black separatists, the Islam-based, and the left somehow sometimes huddling together. Whereas the white supremacy, which is a problem, don't get me wrong, like you said, it might not be the biggest problem because it's largely shunned, right? It's never really accepted by anybody, but these other ones might be.
Well, they do overlap. I mean, a lot of the woke stuff that comes out of the Black separatist movement is also in our universities.
Mhm.
And that's the far left. I mean, they have embraced some of this in a way of weakening America, and that's part of their agenda. So it's not isolated groups. You're
Right.
absolutely right. We just, we don't always see the connections. But what I see focusing, you asked about what happens to Christians. We are being set aside during this particular administration as being haters because of biblical positions we take in terms of other groups that are, in terms of our view of what God created men and women to be, how they were to have children, how they have families, etc. We seem to be expressing hate in the eyes of some people toward other groups. And they also apply this to race as well, because there are a lot of white Christians. So I think you see overlap of what can happen and what kind of pushback we may experience in the next 10 years or so, whatever. We just don't know where it's going. But we have to be aware that we are not isolated as much as we may think. I look at the world right now, Africa, Middle East, Asia, Christians are absolutely being slaughtered. They're being imprisoned, they're being tortured, and we are living like kings compared to a lot of the world. But it may change. And we have to be aware. We have to be prepared for persecution in our minds.
And do you see sort of that age-old hatred that bubbles up all over the world in different ways? Do you see that bubbling up at the moment in what's going on in Israel right now? It started just a couple weeks ago.
It's never stopped. It has never stopped. I mean, the surrounding countries are fueled by money from Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood, for starters, to keep these groups moving, keep them armed, keep them angry. And so there's no change, really. It's just that now a bunch of incidents have triggered this violence, but it's always bubbling under the surface. I mean, there are always attacks. We hear about them. If you read the Israeli news, there's, weekly somebody gets run over by a car intentionally or shot at, or some woman's jogging, she gets her throat slit. This isn't going away. But what's happened now is it's exploded. And there are efforts being made to, quote, destroy Israel, drive them into the sea. That's been the agenda for decades, ever since they started. So we're seeing another flare up of that. But thankfully, the Israeli military is quite good at what it's doing. It's just going to cost a lot of lives, and a lot of innocent lives, not just terrorist lives. So that's terrible.
So if our viewers are watching this and they're trying to learn as much as they can about the whole situation from a global perspective and a historical perspective, and thinking about what's happening today, would you have any words of advice for what can the regular person do? What can the average family, husband, wife, mom, dad, churchgoer, anybody just do if they're not in policy making or security forces, etc.?
I think we have to pursue the truth, and that's with a capital T. And that means being selective and not believing everything you hear on TV, you read in the news, read online. It's unfortunate that some of the louder, angrier voices get heard more than people that tell the truth. So you really have to be selective about where you get your information and how you can be sure these people are trustworthy. Like your organization is something that I trust because I know that you are looking at the truth. And I think we have to really pursue truth. We also have to pray. I mean, I believe prayer is powerful. And I think if enough people agreed in prayer, we might see some changes. But also, we need to express ourselves openly and not be afraid to say, I support the Jewish people. I stand with them. I think it's easy to cringe and say, well, yeah, I'll pray for them. But I think sometimes we have to stand up and say, look, I stand with Israel and I stand with the Jewish people. And the people that are getting the worst abuse are the most biblical Jewish people, the ones that really believe the word of God. So as Christians who also believe the word of God, I think we have an obligation to support them and love them and do what we can to make sure the truth about them and about the liars is known.
Well, thank you, Leela, for your wise words and your critical analysis. We appreciate all you do. And I'm excited that our viewers get to hear from you personally in this report. And
Thank you so
hopefully you'll
much.
join us again very soon.
I'd be very happy to. I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.